My daughter Casey, 17F, worked and saved up money for around a year to be able to afford a better car than we could buy her with our family budget. My other daughter Alana, 16F, has ADHD, recently got her driver's license, and asked to drive Casey's car. Casey allowed it, but Alana ended up having a bad accident around 6 months ago which basically rendered the car unusable. The insurance payout wasn't nearly enough to cover the replacement, and with Alana's medical bills from the accident, thankfully there was no permanent damage, just a broken arm and leg. There was no way we could afford to replace Casey's car immediately. Alana was very apologetic to Casey, and so were we since we couldn't afford to replace her car. Casey didn't accept our apology, and has been basically avoiding us, skipping family dinners, and pretty much pretending that her mom, Alana, and I don't exist and only talks to us if she needs a form signed for her school. I begged her to come to a family therapy session, and she eventually relented but with the condition that Alana wouldn't be present. In the therapy session, she told us that she won't be resuming a relationship with us until we replace her car, which realistically won't be until next year. When the therapist asked how she expected us to do that, Casey said we could just make Alana work to earn the money. The issue is that Alana has severe ADHD, and already has trouble managing her school work. I'm worried that making her work to earn the money will harm her grades and have significant ramifications for her future. Casey said, well, she should have thought about that before destroying my car. I don't care, I'm not gonna speak to any of you unless I have my car replaced. I responded that she was free to avoid speaking to me for as long as she wanted to, but I'm not going to permanently harm her Thre's future to get her a car earlier. My wife agrees with me that we need to stand firm on our position, but is also genuinely afraid of Casey never speaking to her ever again. I understand that her car was ruined, but as a parent I need to look out for all my children, not just one. I also don't want to set the precedent that emotional blackmail will work even if what you're asking for is unreasonable. Ada? I, 39F, and my husband, 43 meters, have 2 daughters, 16 who we'll call A and 17 who I'll call C. C has held down a steady job for over a year now and was able to get herself a car. Now, she got this car right as A passed her own driver's test, so there was a little issue between who was going to be driving. After a little persuasion, C did allow A to use her car, so long as somebody else paid for gas. We told her that wasn't going to cut it. A doesn't have the money for that, and it's her car, her responsibility to keep gas in it and keep it on the road. Here's where it gets difficult. A wrecked about a month ago. Luckily, she was fine aside from a broken wrist and a mild concussion, but C was fuming the entire time, and seemed to have this expectation that we would be replacing her car. Her and my husband got into it, and she threw her arms up like a child and just stopped speaking to us. We coaxed her into going to family therapy with us, though it wasn't productive, as she and the therapist agreed that it'd be best to maintain the reduced contact until she's paid back. Here's the problem. That car was $15 grand. She saved up every penny for a year for that car. She'd ask us about twice a week if we changed our mind, and obviously the answer was no, but that was the only thing she'd say to us. It didn't seem to bother my husband and he kept saying she'll get over it, until last week, she packed some things and had my mother come and get her. She's been staying at her grandmother's for a little over a week now, and she gave me a good earful, whatever CT old he worked, because earlier today, my husband and I were informed we had 30 days to replace the car in full or she was taking us to court. I think my husband is admirable in wanting to stand his ground, but the way I'm looking at it, we have 2 options. And I am sick of my daughter not talking to me because of shit that is not my fault. A has been a wreck, she's already battling severe ADHD, and now she's shaking at the thought of having to appear in court. So I sat them both down, and said we have 2 options. We can suck it up, pay $15,000 and have our daughter and sister back, and A will just have to buck up and work. Or, we can let my dad sue my husband and I on C's behalf, and almost certainly lose. We spoke to 4 different firms, and all 4 echoed similar sentiment, that it would probably cost us close to triple in the end to bring it to court and fight it there. So that's when I told my husband that I am not going $30 grand further into debt for him to hold the pettiest grudge. He's saying that I'm being manipulative by holding this whole situation over his and A's heads. I'm not saying it's not part my fault. All I said was that no matter what, at the end of the day, we owe C and he needs to just accept that. We can afford $15,000 to replace the car, but if we have to dish out double that, just to lose in court anyway, I'm divorcing him before he makes that mistake. In either case, I'm done not supporting both of my daughters. We've tried reasoning with C and it has resulted in nothing. We lost this one. Ida for trying to get my husband to accept it? I feel I may be, just for how long I was being a passenger, no pun intended, in the situation, and for threatening my husband with divorce. I don't think we did anything that wrong, but I'm willing to admit when we made some mistakes and we have to make up for it somehow. Update 1. It's been a few weeks since I last updated and I want to start out by addressing a few things that opened my eyes a little bit in regards to this situation. The first thing being, my husband's post, which came well before my own. He and I fought over that. I truthfully didn't love that he used real names. However, when I found out he posted, for the sake of transparency, I used real names as well. But, with that being said, I went through with the difficult decision to serve him divorce papers. To really abbreviate things, I went to therapy as lots of you suggested, and I was assessed with a diagnosis for an obsessive-compulsive disorder in my second session, and in my third session, we discussed the whole car situation, and my personal therapist explained it to me in a way that made it hard to not feel awful for Case. The discussion we had covered quite a lot, but the common denominator in everything that's been going wrong has, in large part, been my husband. He's the reason Casey shared her car, he's the reason Alana got hurt driving on her own, and he's the reason we're set for court in barely a week and still don't have an attorney. And me. I don't know what I've been doing, but it hasn't been being a mother, if I'm honest. One of you asked me straight up, why I was being a passenger, and I just don't have a good answer. I let my parents know about the divorce and they were a little concerned, but what I didn't expect was for Casey to reach out. The last time we talked was mostly her and my husband butting heads. I really thought she was about to turn me on a spit, but I've never heard her cry like that, at least not since she was much younger. I make a little bit more than my husband, but finding an apartment was brutal, especially with Alana wanting to come with me. I don't think I was clear enough about how badly I want to pay Case back before, but I do. Most of my money is in joint savings though, so there isn't much I can afford, but my husband wasn't going to back down. I won't lie, I was selfish. I begged Casey to drop my name from the suit. I told her I would pay what I could afford to right this second, which wasn't much in comparison, and she told me that it wasn't so much the car or the value on its own she wanted back. It was the security to have something of her own, and she listed off probably dozens of instances where Alana got first pick over her and it was very hard to refute. She told me that losing that much money sucked, which I fully understand, but the bigger loss to her was that her first big girl purchase, which a lot of friends and family were excited about, was now going to be remembered as a family-ending disaster. She told me that she knows I can't replace that. We agreed to breakfast next week in joint therapy, us two, and her only condition was that I don't try at any point to save him from the suit, which I agreed to. Alana came to me even before my last post, saying she only drove so far because my now ex-husband pressured her into picking up the grocery order early for something he wanted to make. This also changed my perspective. I was under the impression that she was doing her own thing, but even my husband owned up to that, which ground my gears, but I put it together. Illegal driver in an expensive car, not insured, and under pressure? Alana drove, but I've come to realize that my ex-husband seems to have a tendency to like to pressure people. He's pressured me a lot too. He probably pressured Casey into letting Alana drive at all. Which brings me back to her, and we finished our talk with better terms. I owe her so much more than breakfast out, but I'm just beyond grateful she's even willing to look at me. I've seen a lot of bold assumptions that I hate Case and that I vastly favor Alana, but I only feel the second part was ever accurate. I've never hated my own daughter. I was frustrated with her over something I've come to realize wasn't her fault. As of now, I'm just adjusting to a much quieter place, and to my phone buzzing nonstop. I've only been moved out for 5 days and Anna has seemed so much less anxious, to me at least. It's odd because my place now isn't anywhere near what the house is, but I think last night was probably the first time I've slept 8 hours since high school. Today was productive, and for Casey. I'll admit it. I hope she wins. I hope she gets her car and then some. As for the divorce, I don't want much material. I won't say no to it. I'd rather just have my share of joint savings, and try to tackle my own issues, of which I guess I have more than I would have been willing to admit a month ago. I know I'm going to get pelted most likely, but I want you to know I'm thankful. The internet is mean, but it tells the truth, and however this turns out, it's largely your comments that helped me see what I was doing wrong, and who was enabling those things. And most importantly, how I could stop it. It's times like this where my dad would tell me I'm not lucky, I'm privileged, and I think that applies here. I'm privileged that my daughter didn't just laugh, even though she could and arguably should have. That's the update. I'll update whenever Case and I meet, barring she's comfortable with it, and then you probably won't hear from me until the whole suit and divorce is over and done with. Now on to second story. Threatened to call the police on my mother-in-law if she gives my husband's estranged daughter our contact info, sparking family chaos. My husband, 42 male, and I, 36F, have a very solid relationship. We have been together for about 13 years, have no children but are very active on my nephew's, 4M, Mark life. For some background, my husband has a child, 16F, Laura, with whom only my Mill and to some degree Phil have a relationship with from his nuclear family. The reason being she was conceived when her mom poked holes to the condoms. It was a whole drama about it and my Mill begging my husband to have a relationship with Laura, but he simply couldn't. He even had to get psychiatric help in order to be able to cope with it. The mom admitted she did it so he would stay with her due to responsibility, but it did not work. He pays child support because the law mandates it, but nothing more. I didn't hear about this news from my husband but from my Mill, and she emphasized that she liked me a lot and hoped I would be a good enough person and procure a relationship between my husband and Laura. I was flabbergasted and asked my now husband about it because my Mill made it seem so different than the truth. He explained he was going to tell me before we moved in together, and to be fair he kind of had already gave me little info here and there, and explained the whole situation and even told me I could go to therapy with him and see the psych info if I wanted, but things were not like my Mill said. His sister confirmed this as well, and explained this issue was the reason she was not as close to her parents anymore. Things went okay-ish for some time and even the wedding went without issues. We all have several boundaries and Mill more or less respects them, although she still have constant communication with Laura and her mom. We have several cycles of very LC with her. But things went to overdrive once my Sil got pregnant with Mark. Mill started telling everybody it was not her first grandchild and all that cryptic stuff. My husband was so uncomfortable about it. She pushed for Laura to be involved in birthday parties, christening, etc., but we all said no. She also invited both of them to her birthday party a couple times and we simply did not attend. Now the new issue is that Laura has been so sad for not having the bio dad in her life. My husband said no and left immediately. I stayed while grabbing our stuff since I had brought food and told her it was not going to happen. According to my Mill, Laura just wants to know my husband since he is her real dad, and despite being okay with her stepdad, it's not the same. She said she will give her our address and contact info because she is desperate for a connection. I told her I would call the police on all of them. I said my Sil will be very upset with her when she hears of this and to not be surprised to get less access to Mark. Mill called my husband cruel and me a bad person for encouraging his cruelty towards an innocent child. I told her I understand Laura is innocent, but she most likely would not be asking the same if it was a woman who conceived in the same circumstances. Update 1. I showed my husband the post and after spending a long time reading the comments he decided enough was enough. Yesterday morning he texted my Sil and Mill telling them he would like to meet and have this over with. Mill said we could do it in the afternoon and that Laura was coming too. We all said okay. My Sil and Bill met us at the door because they didn't want to go in before us. It was really tense since the beginning. Laura tried to hug everybody but we asked her to please not. Then she tried to hug my husband and he was slightly less polite and asked her to not touch him. My Mill was very cheerful somehow and my Phil was just offering everybody drinks and snacks. He was like living in his own reality. We sat down and after what felt like the longest 5 silent minutes of my life, my husband turned to Laura and asked her if she could please leave him alone. Laura responded that he was her dad and she will need his support when she goes to uni since she was planning to move to our city and it was very expensive and hard to find a place. She said she knew he owned his own place and that he clearly has money to spare, so she was wondering if he would help her out. My husband said no, that he was already paying child support and will stop as soon as the law allows him to. She was upset but somehow kept going. She turned to me and said that at the end of the day what is my husband's will go to her since Mill explained the inheritance laws to her and she wanted to be in good terms with me for when we need to decide what to do, why, the house, etc. I just told her not to worry because the house is on my name only and there is already a will covering it all. Mill knew about the will but not the house situation. Laura was a bit taken aback and looked at my Mill like asking for help. She said that even if there is no future money she thought my husband was unfair to her and that she used to think he simply didn't want to be a dad, but he is amazing with Mark and we even take him on trips. My Sil asked her point blank if she knew how she was conceived and she does. Laura knows everything and says that while it was not the nicest way, her mom wanted her so badly that made it happen. She said Sil should understand because she has her cousin and she would love a relationship with him. My Sil was seething and Bill told Laura he will literally call the cops if she tries to get near Mark. She started crying saying that she wanted her family to love her and be as awesome as everybody is with Mark and that it is not her fault and her mom is not a bad person, she just wanted a family, and my husband denied them that. My husband said that it was the lying and the deception that costed the relationship, not him, that if there was an honest mistake things would have been different. He told her he will never be her dad and she needs therapy. He said that she could get a job instead of expecting him to pay for her life in the long term and that he is not willing to have contact after today. Mill started begging both her kids not to go and maybe do family therapy. They both said they are going NC with her and Phil is on thin ice. Mill is blocked everywhere. I guess this is it. NC with Mill from all of us. Sil and husband seem actually pretty happy with the decision. We had dinner together and the topic was dropped after a couple minutes and we focused on other stuff. I am sorry there is no Disney ending, but this is for the best and I still support my husband's mental health above all. Update 2. We are humans and FL. Odd as every single one of the rest. I thought the issue was over and dropped, but it seems it is now. We had some weeks of bliss and chaos afterwards. We are all still recovering from it. Now to what happened to explode our life again, and please keep in mind it brings me no joy. My nephew Mark turned 5 weeks after my last update. After so many messages from my Mill and Phil, my Sil decided to let them attend but told Mill she was not to bother me or my husband. My Mill didn't approach us once but kept staring at us and we decided to ignore her. The issue was that I kept holding my pumped stomach and my husband kept being goofy about it. I am not pregnant. I have several intolerances to delicious yummy things that make me bloated, but I misbehave and eat sometimes. My Mill does not know about most of them since they are age developed and we used to go yo-yo with LC with her, so I guess she assumed I was pregnant. A week after Mark's birthday party is when everything went to hell. Laura came to my husband's office and made a scene. She was screaming at him how she couldn't believe he was starting over without taking care of his first child and many other insults and stuff. She was throwing office supplies and crying and making a whole deal, so the office manager called the police and an ambulance. She also called me. By the time I arrived, my husband was having a panic attack in his office and totally sure he was fired. I told him to not worry and I will sort it. I explained everything to everybody from coworkers, to police, to EMTs. Laura was taken in for evaluation and the coworkers took a long lunch so my husband could leave without having the awkward walk out. I took my husband home shaking, and as he was panicking and crying he said he felt unsafe. I took him to his psychiatrist and the psychiatrist was able to calm it, and we also had a session together days later where he opened up more about what the mom did to him. This has been very expensive but worth it for sure. Laura was not really in trouble since the office manager agreed to let it go for an apology and payment. The mom, Laura's, was not having it. The moment she saw my husband at the station she went ballistic and my husband couldn't handle it and he had another panic attack. This woman is a fucking doctor but does not care for it. At the end she paid the fine and restitution to the office and took Laura home. My Sil was so done with my Mill after it, she told her dad he either divorce her or she is cutting him too. It is still a 50-50 since Sil is literally Phil's favorite person but he has been married to Mill for like 44 years. My Bill took my husband camping and they had fun and kept him distracted. He has been mainly on sick leave since the incident. He is a manager so he would come one day a week and then get the rest of the week covered so he can recover. This was suggested by his bosses. Hey, all feel like they should have protected their employees better. My Sil, husband, Bill, and I had a disagreement due to Laura's expenses. I suggested to just get her a block payment and requesting she should get therapy, but all of them say she should get nothing. I said I would be willing to pay for it, but after the new revelations on my husband's relationship with the mom, my Sil is even more up on arms against helping them more than we should. I do feel bad for Laura, I do. And I know the rest, husband, Sil, Bill, used to a little. Now, there is no way in heaven to make them help her. The last nice thing my husband did was convincing his bosses to not charge Laura and paying for the monitor she broke. Since his leave my husband spends a lot of his afternoons with Mark, my Sil and Bill, and leading the charge on getting Laura to accept a bulk payment and therapy but don't want her in their life. Mill and Phil and estranged so far, and my husband goes to therapy once a week and slowly recovering. And before it starts, yes, we know Laura is a victim of her mom, but does it give her a right to re-traumatize my husband? I still stand with my husband and probably will be called the worst of the worst, but some advice was very good the first few times, so that's why I came back.